Welcome to Inquire and Inspire, a podcast exploring connections and community with our co-hosts Brent Flickinger and Layla Kohler-Frew.
Welcome again to Inquire and Inspire, exploring connections and community. I'm Brent Flickinger and my co-host is Layla Kohler-Frew. She's a vice president at Habitat for Humanity Chesapeake. We worked together over the years in my role as a community planner, and we became friends in her role as a community liaison. How are you doing today, Layla?
Great. I know we have a lot to talk about during this episode.
As we have so many times over the years, as we begin our discussion, I just hope you're not thinking what I'm not thinking.
Oh, I hope so too.
I do think we really have a simpatico. Because, for example, I've been thinking that if I were you, I'd be a lot more like me.
Wow, Brent, where do you come up with these ideas?
Well, I've taken these jokes from a book called Letting Go is All We Have to Hold On To. It's by this guy named Greg Eisenberg, and on the cover there's like these Buddhist monks on a roller coaster enjoying themselves. So these jokes are like Buddhist koans. I think they're a little better jokes than the dad jokes I usually tell. What do you think?
I honestly, I think both of them are just absolutely chef's kiss.
Well, that's why you're the co-host, because you're so positive about all this. Anyway, moving along, today's interview relates to one of the ways we use our land in communities. Before we start, I would like for us to offer acknowledgement to the people who inhabited these lands in Maryland for 15,000 years, the Piscataway. Each of us will read a paragraph.
Sounds like a good way to begin.
As we gather today, we honor and acknowledge that we stand on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Piscataway Indian Nation. We recognize that for over 15,000 years, the Piscataway people have been the sacred stewards of this land. To the Piscataway, this ground is not merely a place of habitation, but a spiritual relative.
We honor the Piscataway's enduring relationship with the Creator and their commitment to living in balance with the earth. May our presence here continue to reflect the trustworthiness, harmony, justice, reverence, and humility that our relationship to this sacred land and all our relations and relatives requires of us. Wanashi, which means thank you.
Let's just take a moment to take this in.
Thinking about this land where we are, I know that many people who have driven around the city may have the impression that Baltimore is a place where there are lots of disinvested neighborhoods rife with empty shells of vacant homes, and that a lot of the vacant lots are filled with weeds or needles and broken glass, you name it, making them undesirable places to live next to or visit. Although there aren't magic wands to ameliorate these complex problems, I'm looking forward to today's interview with Grow Home in South Baltimore.
Yes, I am too. Grow Home is headquartered in Brooklyn, and it operates in other Baltimore communities. I love this nonprofit. They have sports programs in Carroll Park in Southwest Baltimore, for example, activating further that space in that park. However, what we're focusing on today is their work related to reclaiming some of these vacant lots in various neighborhoods and also promoting projects and activities that bring neighbors together.
I appreciate that besides supporting residents who are leading the initiatives to bring activities to these properties, they also do job training in a number of fields, especially in what's known as the green economy. One of the great services they provide is helping to not only restore these lots to productive use, but also to maintain the green infrastructure.
Our interview from the previous episode talks a lot about green infrastructure, which is simply the relationship between the land and the human activities that, for example, deal with stormwater runoff, which is an important component of green infrastructure. Grow Home not only works with neighbors to reclaim these lots, but they also provide maintenance.
Mm. It is so hard to find resources that do that continuing maintenance. I've seen places where trees do not survive because they're planted and then there's no plan to water them.
That's right, maintaining green infrastructure is very important. Let me share that in arranging this interview, I've reminded of why we're known as Baltimore. Grow Home's director Michael Dorsey reminded me that David Rouse, whom I interviewed in episode 2, when he was head of research at the American Planning Association, brought a team to Brooklyn to develop a plan for Garrett Park at the entrance to Brooklyn. Mike and I were both involved in that project, which I didn't remember. So that's an example of Baltimore. I bring these two interviews, and hey, they're actually related. This is actually a follow-up to the other interview. Isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful, and it reminds me of it's like a quirkiness of how things work here, and that makes me think about Baltimore's quirkiness in general. That's one reason that people like Baltimore is because of its quirkiness. I bet you have a story that would involve that with Grow Home.
Ah, indeed I do, Layla. Grow Home's office is in a building on the main street in Brooklyn, Patapsco Avenue. This building had been vacant for quite a while before they took it over. Can you guess what business used to be in that building?
No idea.
It was a pigeon supply store.
Wow.
Yeah, believe it or not, people used to own homing pigeons for years, and like any pet, they needed places to get their supplies.
I am not surprised. I hear stories like this all the time. Now I'm really looking forward to this interview.
Okay, let's get started. I'm very excited to have some guests with us today. We're going to talk a lot about our general theme of health and well-being through community development. And we mentioned previously, Layla and I were talking about in our last episode, we kind of did the theoretical work around things like green infrastructure, social determinants of health, the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profits. And today we're going to actually get down on the ground and see how one organization is putting these things into practice. So I'd like to welcome Mike Dorsey, who's the CEO of this organization, Grow Home, and Dr. Ike Enemo, likes to go by Dr. Ike, who's been involved with the organization on staff and on the board, and Dr. Kristen Marmee from the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, who's done a lot of research around the kind of programs and projects that we're going to be talking about today. So Mike Dorsey, this was your brainchild. Mike graduated with a master's degree in social work from the University of Maryland, and he's been involved in a lot of different nonprofit work. Mike and I met in Brooklyn when he was working on a youth development organization there. And in 2018, Mike, you decided to form this organization called Grow Home. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got there, and how, what your vision for this was. I mean, you grew up in Baltimore, you love Baltimore, you love the neighborhoods. I know you're coming from your heart when you did this. So tell us a little bit about Grow Home.
It's a big preamble, Brent. I appreciate it. So I began working in the community sense in Baltimore and the greater Baltimore area through my training at the University of Maryland School of Social Work at Bon Secours. And so the Bon Secours Community Health Center on 26 North Fulton. And my first assignment in grad school, because half of your training at the University of Maryland School of Social Work is field work, is the application in the field, is the real, how can we do this questions. My assignment was to look at a vacant lot at the corner of Lemon and Payson and see if we could take the community that's in the area and the church across the street and make something change. And so I used that as a lot of the beginning places, and that was back in 2010. Fast forward a number of years and a lot of the different lessons and things that I've learned and understandings, and looking at where we are and what systems are not working for as many people as they could, and where these conversations have been around what it is to develop a more sustainable future, to see communities inside of the city get the fair attention and the infrastructure redevelopment that they need, especially for a future that's going to be challenged by climate change.
If you talk about Lemon and Payson, most people don't know about that or don't have any interest in that part of West Baltimore.
I mean, the Bon Secours people do, and because they're right there, and certainly the community members that live on those blocks, they care, and they're just as important as anybody else. I mean, you're right. It's a disenfranchised, forgotten about spot. Yeah, it was a spot where you were getting a lot of foot traffic and not car traffic. The only local commerce was a local corner store, and about 50% of the houses were boarded up. The Bon Secours Community Center has since, they have multiple offices, but they've reestablished one that actually overlooks that park at this point. So it's pretty cool to see the Chinese elm that I planted on the street side in 2010 from their viewpoint as their, if you take a community meeting in their community conference room.
And so where did you go from there?
I mean, I graduated. I went into working at the Chesapeake Center for Youth Development. I was a case manager for first-time youth offenders. One of the things that I found was really good was a lot of these kids, these teenagers, were making mistakes and using their energy in ways that weren't really effective, but getting them a job had a lot more immediate positive outcomes or consequences. You show up and you get paid, or you don't and you don't. And I recognize what was different about even when I grew up not that long ago, and entry-level jobs and where they were, and some of the skills that were common and trained inside of the K through 12 system or are not anymore, and where these pieces are changing. And so picking up tools about community needs and what it looks like, and where green spaces can be galvanizing, picking up tools around the larger introductory economy and workforce development, and the publicly accessible training systems, which the most readily available publicly funded workforce training program is the K through 12 system. And we're missing a lot of things like how to balance a checkbook inside of there. So taking a lot of those pieces there, and then what is it to have the conversations and be realistic and practical and involving for the community leadership at the local level, and trying to pull those things together has been a lot of the major input sources that has created some of Grow Home's formula. And what I also love is that we're also open to be wrong, to change, and to adjust to what the community is looking at and where those local leadership's pieces are.
For Grow Home, and what was that all about? Because you were already working in Brooklyn, where Grow Home is headquartered.
It was a rare opportunity that came together that Jeff Dugan and I were. Jeff is a long-term partner for Grow Home and one who works at organizing sports and local access in these green spaces for green spaces that are choosing sport and sport opportunity or sport access as, sort of their local opportunity for a healthy living and heart healthy activity. That if it's inside of some of these difficult neighborhoods on the west side, like ABC Park, if the local park doesn't offer it, it doesn't exist. Anyway, Jeff and I just kind of had a rare opportunity with a couple early funders. The National Recreation Foundation and the Conservation Fund as the key initial headliners to give us a chance to build a new idea and kind of be scrappy and lean and work around what that is from the beginning. And that was, back in 2018. And so Jeff and I, as a two-man squad in 2018, now to an organization that's got 17 full-time staff and at least as many part-timers. So the person power has gone way up.
That's very exciting. I mean, how many neighborhoods have this kind of an extensive organization like that? And the idea of the synergy of bringing together your experience as a social worker, dealing with vacant lots and jobs, and then somebody who's working in recreation programs. It's really wonderful. And when I look at your website, it resonates with me as a planner because I see what you're doing as a comprehensive approach to neighborhood and community revitalization, ultimately. So you're working in the physical environment, and you're also supporting individuals and groups in these underserved neighborhoods. And you're doing it by helping to build capacity with local leadership, to create jobs, recreational opportunities, by turning these empty and ignored green spaces into centers of neighborhood activity. That's what I like about it. And as all of us know, you're across the street from a lot that's just full of trash and debris. It really brings down it brings down the neighborhood, it leads to more trash and debris. And so what can we turn these lots into something productive, some kind of an asset in the neighborhood? I love that. And then creating jobs and career paths to help fix up these lots, maintain them, and working with communities. I mean, to me, it's a holistic way of addressing a lot of things.
I could just challenge one piece of terminology that we're using, vacant lots. I really want to make sure that we can consider applying these parts of stewardship and improvement to all public green spaces or green spaces in general, whether or not that's the hospital grounds or the campus of a college or a high school or an elementary school, a park space itself, a community garden, or a vacant lot. It's something that we can easily see and access with all five of our senses. And if it's well maintained, it has tremendous secondary and tertiary benefits, as well as the primary benefits that come from using it. And that's something that Dr. Mari and I worked with for a long time through Project Vital in understanding what impacts were on adolescents around the differences between green spaces that were maintained and kept and green spaces that were left to, we're going to call the city elements, which sometimes people see as unsavory. And yes, trash is one of them.
I'm really happy to bring in Dr. Kristen Mari. I mean, we want to talk a lot more about the details of what you did with these lots, your career training programs, and other services for people. Perhaps I should introduce Dr. Mari at this point. We'll come back to some examples. Dr. Mari is a behavioral scientist. She's working out of the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and her research does promote adolescent health and well-being, which is a lot of what we're talking about. Her research is both quantitative and qualitative, that illuminates the structural and the social determinants of adolescent health. Her work spans topics like food insecurity, mental health, gender socialization, neighborhood influences, and especially focusing on youth disconnected from school and employment. And for those of us that have been in these neighborhoods, for those people who live in these neighborhoods, all these issues are important, either to create problems, make them worse, or to uplift, bring neighbors together, have a sense of hope and well-being. And Dr. Mari collaborates with all kinds of folks, policymakers, public health officials, community organizations, to translate her research into actionable programs and policy agendas to make this concrete. She works locally and internationally. Dr. Mari, welcome, and perhaps you'd say a little bit about your Project Vital, so that we have sort of some background as we're going forward into what specifically Grow Home is doing.
Yeah, I'd be happy, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Project Vital stands for Vacant Lot Improvements to Transform Adolescent Lives, and that was actually an acronym that our team came up with about this study. But there was a group of interdisciplinary researchers that spanned different fields in both Johns Hopkins and even the University of Maryland. And we were very interested in understanding the impact of greening on the health of adolescents, because at that time, there had been a lot of research that had been done among adults. There was a huge study that was done in Philadelphia, a big randomized control trial, where they did show that greening vacant lots dramatically improved the mental health of those who lived next to those green vacant lots, and also reduced gun violence. Other cities had shown similar types of findings, but again, they were always done among adults. So I am an adolescent health researcher. I've been one my whole career, and I do know that adolescents, probably everybody here knows that they think and perceive things a little bit differently. And especially their exposure with the neighborhood and the environment is different from adults. They have different activities, they're doing different things. And especially this generation has a different relationship. Many of them have been more inside. And so we were then asking ourselves, well, I wonder if we would see similar types of impacts among adolescents as we do adults. So that's how this study came about. There was a funding award through Johns Hopkins where we were really interested in trying to match applied researchers with more bench scientists to see if we could address a public health problem together. So it was a big year-long process. We were one of 4 groups that got this big 4-year award. With that, one of the first things that we did was we got together a team that was not only just researchers, but also community-based folks like Grow Home. We wanted city agencies also represented, greening folks like Baltimore Green Space. We had Parks and People. We had the Baltimore City Environmental Control Board. So we had different people representing different sectors. And so the first thing that we did was we knew that we needed to develop a big database of all the greened vacant lots in the city as much as we could. So that took actually the first year, and BINIA has that on their website, the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance. They were the ones that managed that, and they collected data from as many different greening folks as they could. So that was then all geo-spaced and located on a map. You can filter it. There was 6,000 parcels that were reduced to 800 in some specific unique sites. And that is, again, on the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance website.
And people may or may not know, Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators is an amazing report that comes out regularly about all kinds of issues, all kinds of data in various neighborhoods, and it comes out of the University of Baltimore, and it's very, very helpful in all kinds of ways. Because, of course, like any data, you might have certain assumptions that things are a certain way or another way, and then what we find out may be very different than what you might assume. So I just want to make sure our listeners are aware of that report. Go ahead, explain a little bit about what you did.
The key question was, do we see any health impacts with greening vacant lots among adolescents? And so to do that, we took our database and we then kind of mapped and worked with Mike and his community partners to try to identify groups that had served young people in the community where we could easily access them and get parental permission and all of that. It was a big endeavor. And so we ended up collecting 363 surveys among adolescents ages 14 to 19. And then one of the cool things that we did with Grow Home is we also wanted to observe the green vacant lots that were within a 2-block radius of where the adolescent survey respondents lived. And so we paired Grow Home kids, so Mike's kids with my kids from Hopkins, the grad school students, and they formed pairs. And what was so interesting is that the Baltimore kids were, they were the true experts. Many of the grad school students were international students and didn't understand, and it was kind of their first time and really looking at Baltimore. So it was so fun for Mike and I to just kind of watch these relationships. And Mike was part of, like, both of us were drivers, but he got to actually hear the conversations more between the grad students and the youth.
But I want to go back to Mike on some more of the specifics that you did. I mentioned there's like working in the physical environment, and there's working with, jobs, which in careers, not just jobs, and working with the people as well as the environment. And you mentioned triple bottom line. Could you just say what that means to you?
Sure. I mean, it triple bottom line to me translates into the economic implications, the environment or the sort of shared space implications, almost the community level, and then back into the individual itself. And so what it is in a lot of our operations is a person can be trained in tactile industries, in what it is to work with their hands, apply that to some of these shared green spaces inside of a community, vacant lot and city park alike, which can be accessed. And some of these works themselves are tree plantings and stormwater maintenance and shrubs and repairing and buffering and all sorts of different pieces that are important for the environmental infrastructure and the community's ability to access these green spaces safely. They're also imparting, as a canvas for training, the opportunity for job seekers, many of them young, but a few of them creeping up there to at least challenge me in age, to get an understanding of how that works and increase their own earning potential. So there's the economic, there's the environmental. And then because they're also repairing parts of their own community, by pairing workforce development with community revitalization, the individual themselves and their health outcomes are parts of that upward trajectory and that continued piece. The other thing that's even greater is, one, if it is inside of their community and they've been a part of the development and the building, they care about keeping it that way. And it's pretty easy from a philanthropic standpoint and the sort of capital development standpoint to let's invest in these spaces and build them. But then the maintenance, it has to be ongoing. And it's a great training ground for that workforce development as well. So those are how those pieces interact.
Yes, because one of the things I know from being in community development work, there are organizations that get grants to plant trees and deal with stormwater runoff and other things, but it's harder to fund maintenance. So a lot of these projects get done, and I like that Grow Home has been able to get some resources to not only do the plantings and other environmental improvements, but that you actually can help to maintain things. I think that's wonderful. I don't think it's the common practice. But anyway, I think on the triple bottom line, we are talking about the environment, we're talking about the individual growth, we're talking about jobs, and they all have to go together. I mean, to be successful, we need all these different components, as well as the medical aspects, which I'm sure Dr. Ike will talk about in a few minutes. I'd just like to hear a couple examples, Mike, of what's happened with some of these lots, because I know there are activities, but it's also a community building thing. I mean, my experience is that sometimes people give up in these neighborhoods. That's one reason these lots are not maintained. They're dumping grounds. But I've seen when, like, for example, there's an alley cleanup, a lot of neighbors who normally just stay inside, they'll see their neighbors out there. They say, oh, somebody's doing something. Let me come out and get involved. And I know one of the projects that you worked on was now called the Victory Garden, which is in Brooklyn, and I think that was one of those cases where you had one of your partners, the City of Refuge. I think they maybe even owned the lot, and a lot of people came out. They did a lot of work, and now I believe it's a community garden, right? And some of the things that are grown are made available to the neighborhood. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I just remember being out there and seeing how different it was and how great people felt having a space that looked good where they could come together and work or socialize.
Yeah, so I mean, different spaces that we take into our fold, so to speak, as parts of training grounds, every year get some of the same standard deliveries of how is it clean, how is it well planted, how is it accessible and welcoming. But then we're also able to create some improvements, and through some of those conversations with community leaders, again, accessing what their vision is for that space and what it is that we can elevate their voice to potentially bring in other kinds of investment. And so Victory Garden is an inner block park, which means it's surrounded on all sides by residential properties. It's kind of like a collective backyard. So theoretically, everyone should be able to come outside and on their back porch have access to this shared big green space where all the kids can play. But sometimes that also is looked at as, well, it's everyone's back door and they're not looking at it, so it's easy for me to do some big illegal dumping and deposit a burned out car. So those are some of the realities that became that, collective backyard, and then whose responsibility is it? So we, working alongside of community leadership and other institutions like City of Refuge Baltimore, who, yes, adopted the property through the Adopt a Lot city process, we began to clean it up and ask the community what they wanted to see there, and different things have grown across the years, and community members around there have accessed it for their own food and nutrition. We're also adding in, or have added in, some solar cells, so even though this site is off grid, we can make sure there's power access there. And we're going to be adding in a little bit of a tree nursery inside of the hoop house that we constructed on that property. So it's pretty encouraging. And then just so you know, there are some other spaces where the community's value are in things like sport. And so ABC Park, for example, over on the west side, again, in Mill Hill and Carrollton Ridge, not too far from where I began on that fateful lot on Lemon and Payson, has encouraged and created year-round athletics programming entirely from the volunteer-led efforts of the community members and local leadership. Now, these kids know that that park, which was dangerous and used by some negative elements, became, over the last 15 years, clean, safe, energized, activated, programmed, and a place for community members to regularly communicate with each other, and a place that the city has also chosen to invest in and create some really big, larger, publicly accessible amenities that have completely redesigned that whole area and made it a lot cheerier.
And so that was an example where I think one person sort of championed this, a community leader, and of course the folks living there only have limited time and resources. So I think Grow Home is the kind of organization that can get behind something like that the community initiates and bring in other resources. And I don't know about ABC Park, but again, you're doing training of people for jobs, and some of them are actually people that you hire in your organization. So you're not only doing the training, but you're hiring some people to go in and help the neighborhood do some of this work.
That's correct. And also in the case of ABC Park, those community leaders, Derwin Hanna being the biggest champion, used us, and we acted with him to do the technical work, the grant writing, the grant reporting, the fiscal tracking, things like that, to support it, to make sure that he had access to more and better resources to make those pieces a reality.
Now we're going to listen to a song that I wrote that I think fits in very well with today's interview.
There's a magic that moves a person when he makes a garden grow. It fills up all his being, it feels part of life's flow. It sneaks up ever so slowly, changing you with its magic power. It will soothe your angry temper, bring you the peace of a flower. The peace of a flower. Now some folks are full of frustration, wanna fight back from lives of strife. But how can someone wanna destroy after learning how to bring things to life? Learning how to bring things to life. Learning how to bring things to life. This vacant lot's brought nothing but lots of trash and lots of vice. But the love the kids put in it is making it a paradise. That energy that so often turns into violence and fear is transformed before our eyes into gentleness that's clear. It becomes gentleness that's clear. Now some folks are full of frustration, wanna fight back from lives of strife. But how can someone wanna destroy after learning how to bring things to life? Learning how to bring things to life. Learning how to bring things to life. There's a magic that moves a person when she makes a garden grow. Fills up all her being, she feels part of life's flow. It sneaks up ever so slowly, changing you with its magic power. It will soothe your angry temper, bring you the peace of a flower. The peace of a flower. No more violence and strife, 'cause we're bringing things to life. Yes, we're bringing things to life. Oh, we're bringing things to life.
I would now like to introduce Dr. Ike Enoma. Well, Dr. Ike is a medical doctor. He got his training at Johns Hopkins and graduated from the medical school and has become engaged with communities and particularly in Grow Home, working there for a while and being on the board. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about your story, Dr. Ike, because it's intriguing. You called yourself the Band-Aid doctor. You're an emergency room doctor, and I think you saw some gaps in preventative health. Is that why you're the Band-Aid doctor?
Yeah. I may have said that at some point. I think that was earlier on, in the middle of my transition. I came to grow home in a transition from emergency medicine to what I'm doing now, which is preventive medicine. And similar to you, Brent and Mike, a lot of what I care about and what I hope to do with my time here on this planet was forged in Baltimore City. I spent a lot of my time as a medical student. I don't call myself an organizer because I have a lot of respect for organizers, but supporting community leaders and organizers in East Baltimore, really really learning the historical context of housing injustice that had taken place and was taking place sort of, at the behest of the institution that I was getting my education from. And so that, for all intents and purposes, really kind of forged and radicalized my image of what medicine could and should be. And I came away from that experience really thinking that medicine is it's the context of our lives, it's our environments, it's our housing, it's these things that I think public health rightfully has understood to be like social and structural determinants, these larger forces in our lives that are sometimes easy to see and sometimes hard to see, but make up the vast majority of what determines our health outcomes. And so I took that philosophy and found myself gravitating towards emergency medicine. I think rightfully so. It's partially a joke, but I think if you're familiar with the pit, I think it's no mistake that one of the most accurate depictions of hospital medicine we've gotten on television that is so deeply steeped in social commentary takes place in the emergency department. That's because the line is so thin. The line between the hospital and the rest of the world in the emergency department is incredibly thin. All these systems that ultimately don't work for people or end up failing people funnel them into somewhere like the emergency department when things get really, really bad, on obviously. And I have so much love for emergency medicine and the philosophy and the ethos and emergency responders. And I think what I was realizing in my postgraduate emergency medicine training was that along with sort of experiencing my own personal profound physician burnout at not really being able to feel like I was getting a strong grasp at healing and understanding these systems, I was also learning that I wanted so much more of my time and my energy and my life really to be spent caring for people in the context of their whole lives.
I imagine that it must have been frustrating to see people coming into the emergency room over and over as if that was their medical facility or their doctors. Instead of doing preventative activities in medicine and so on, I imagine that was an issue for you when you decided to kind of get out of the emergency room a bit, right? And deal with some of these things we're talking about at the community level. And that you're now on the board of Grow Home, right? So you have, I guess, seen this kind of approach as helpful for the health and well-being of people in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, 100%. I think an experience like that makes you frustrated with systems. It makes you question why don't we have robust systems of care and prevention? Why don't we have robust systems of meeting people in their neighborhoods and making sure that they have what they need where they live, that their environments are safe, that they're clean and green, and that people can thrive where they are. And I think I'm fortunate that a lot of that frustration was alchemized into a transition in which I found Grow Home. I was able to do a lot of meaningful work as a case manager. And at the time, I think I was also appreciating a lot of the overlap between case management and emergency care, and I'm sure social work as well. In that, again, you're really managing the needs of people in the context of their lives and their social determinants that shape their lives. I think the difference, at least right now, is that structures around case management and social work, at least at Grow Home, I would say, we're interested in doing that as a practice, doing that as a continuous practice, and actually having the structure and accommodation to make that the focus. Like I loved the medicine, I loved all of that piece of it, but it was always competing between the medicine and the hospital and the pace and also trying to care for for people in the context of their lives. And so I think that was a really important thing for me to see, was that this could be preventive. This could be before things get so bad that someone ends up in the emergency department. I may have used the term Band-Aid, but I really do want to shout out to every emergency physician and responder out there. Like, we do need the Band-Aids, if that's what we're gonna call it. Like, we need both of those.
Yeah, we need all these programs. So it's
Yeah.
great that you're working and using your medical background to work in communities. Let's go back to Dr. Bari now. We're hearing a lot about these various approaches, things that have been happening, and then things like just the research we know. 15 minutes of moderate exercise a day can affect your health in great ways. We have recreational programs and things here. So, what are some of the things that you've been learning about these approaches to neighborhood revitalization and how it affects adolescent health and well-being?
Through Project Vital, one of the most significant findings we found was that adolescents who lived next to any green vacant lot were significantly more likely to be happier compared to those that were not. So happiness was a significant outcome. We also found that the type of greening makes a difference. There are certain features that have different effects, and so not all features have the same. We didn't find anything related to community gardens, but that is not to say I wouldn't write them off. I think that the adolescents in our study probably did not do a whole lot with gardening in their neighborhoods, and that's probably why we didn't see an impact. But we did see significant impacts with seeding, with lighting, and especially with playground equipment and sports equipment. Those features exhibited strong effects for reducing depression, reducing weapon violence exposure, and improving food insecurity. So those are some of the main outcomes. Other research around green space in general, there's been a lot, but just in general, we have shown that, you were mentioning about physical activity. Well, people who don't live next to spaces that are welcoming for that are not going to get physical activity. And so we have to make safe spaces if people are going to go and actually utilize the outdoors for physical activity. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And a lot of these neighborhoods that are disinvested, they don't have spaces like that. And a lot of adolescents are actually afraid to go out there. Safety is a big, huge determinant. And so what we're showing, and not only in Baltimore but other cities, is that this notion of cleaning and greening, which is a relatively low-cost intervention, can have significant health impacts if we do it well. But like as Mike said before, it requires the community to be involved. Maintenance is a huge issue. We saw that 52% of the lots in our database that were greened actually reverted back to not being. They were overgrown. So that's something that needs to be part of any kind of plan. And Mike can, I know, speak more to that. But if we think about the green spaces, know that it's not just for looks. It also can have significant health impacts and be a preventative strategy. So we can avoid or at least reduce the number of adolescents that are going into emergency rooms, as Ike was mentioning.
Well, thank you. And I know, Mike, part of what Grow Home does, even in a city park like Carroll Park, you have recreational activities and sports leagues and things for the young people. And again, all these things need to come together. We need the medical expertise, we need the infrastructure, the physical land to be improved. We need folks to be trained to be able to do these things, to get jobs and careers, because if you don't have a job, it makes it very tough. So I really appreciate all these things. I mean, there's a lot more we could talk about, and maybe we'll pick it up another time. But Mike, why don't you just say some more things on your mind before we close our interview?
Sure. So to close it out in a different way, early in my career, I got involved in park prescription programming and doctors telling their young persons, this was specifically pediatricians, primary care physicians, telling their patients that they can be immediately and long-term healthier if they got outside for an hour a day. And then immediately the patients will say, well, how or what program do I access? And the doc, well, I don't know. I live in the county, kid. I can't help you out. So when you look at these neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested from, as Ike was mentioning earlier about housing instability and the history of redlining, that's where these green spaces have lost their impact, their quality, and their opportunity. And if it's not locally available, we're talking about quarter-mile, half-mile radius of their home, then they're not going to get it. They're not going to go to it. They're not going to travel to it. It's not going to happen if it doesn't happen right there. So that's your health and purpose and person that way. It's as exemplified in Kristen's study in Dr. Mari's Project Vital, that it's the green spaces that are close to where they live that have these deep dramatic impacts. The other thing that we're talking about in systems navigation is choice. And so the economic implications around it are giving more choices and more availability. The reasons, some of which, that persons inside of these dramatically disinvested areas only have access to the local spaces is they can't afford anything else, whether it be time or travel or the opportunity and knowledge and education. And we are designed, our human bodies have to be outside and move. And so now we've got a bunch of people stuck and they can't access it, and it's not working because it's not available locally, and they don't have the dollars to travel around and know what the regional parks are or the state parks are or the Adirondacks where my dad was a camp counselor and made me go to every summer, and I can't thank him enough for it. So these are all parts of those different conversations. And so, yeah, our best available answer at Grow Home is to be restoring green spaces inside communities, training persons on what skills are required to do that and to maintain it, and to listen to the persons who live there about what they want to see in those communities. And with that increased earning capacity and knowledge of how democratic systems work, perhaps they can continue to build a stronger, greener, healthier tomorrow.
That's great. It's very inspiring to me, this whole approach to things. Very comprehensive, many faceted, and again, I'm really grateful for the research expertise we have here, medical expertise, the community-based involvement, and I really want to thank all of you for your time, and Kristen and Dr. Ike and Mike, and appreciate your with us today. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. This was really nice. I appreciate being here.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
I was very inspired by that interview. I love that Mike used the term galvanizing green spaces. It's great that we have organizations like Grow Home to support not only the improvements, but the maintenance and the community involvement required to bring these vibrant places within neighborhoods.
Yes, Grow Home is definitely a good example of one of those organizations that's working on the ground to improve these green spaces. We talked a lot about green infrastructure, social determinants of health last time, and so this is wonderful to actually see how an organization like this is bringing this to fruition.
For listeners interested in more information, let's share some other resources.
Folks may not know that Baltimore City government has a comprehensive program to deal with vacant lots and green spaces in general. This effort coordinates programs of various agencies. It's housed in the Planning Department's Office of Sustainability. One example of this coordination is the Department of Housing and Community Development's Adopt a Lot program. And this is simply how it works. If there's a lot that's not used or it's neglected in a neighborhood, HCD has an application process online for residents to adopt that lot for neighborhood use.
This is a great program. I've seen it work very successfully in neighborhoods in which I've worked.
Well, one caveat is that even though a lot is actively being used and managed by community members, and that can be going on even for a long period of time, the city can take it back with as little as 30 days' notice.
I know that this can be heartbreaking when so much energy and love has been put into upgrading and using these spaces. That's why there's an organization called Baltimore Green Space that can help put a property into a land trust so that it is permanently protected from future development.
Yes, if you would like to find out more about the city's overall approach to repurposing vacant lots and green spaces, you can email sustainability@baltimorecity.gov. That's sustainability@baltimorecity.gov.
And to participate in the Adopt a Lot program, you can start by emailing developmentinfo@baltimorecity.gov. And again, that's developmentinfo@baltimorecity.gov.
Besides Grow Home, there are also a number of similar organizations that are working at the grassroots level. You can look at Grow Home's website if you want to volunteer or be involved. And there are other organizations, perhaps where you live, that are doing similar things. We talked at the beginning about these vacant lots and the trash and debris that people often see. But if you really get down into the neighborhoods, you see that there are a lot of activities and organizations that are addressing these problems.
I'm glad that we could spotlight this one today.
Okay, well, thanks for listening. Please let us know any comments, questions, and suggestions you may have. We look forward to the next time we can all be together.
This has been Inquire and Inspire, a podcast exploring connections and community with our hosts, Bodacious Brent Flickinger and Laughing Layla Kohler-Frew. Our engineer was David the Dynamo Heath. We also want to thank our behind-the-scenes people. Our pricing consultant, Mark High. Our data and fact checker, Noah Authority. And our all-important budget accountant, Donna Addup. And be sure to support our sponsors. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate us and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. But more importantly, please tell just one other person about it. Word of mouth is the single best way to share something good. If you have comments, questions, or feedback, or if you want to suggest a future guest, please email Brent@flickinger.com. We look forward to hearing from you.